How do we reconcile our desire for success, for financial independence, for freedom? How do we reconcile that with the fact that Jesus made it clear that you can't love God and money, that you will love one and hate the other? How do we reconcile these two profound issues? Are our dreams and desires just automatically wrong? Now, there used to be a saying that it's okay to have it as long as it doesn't have you. The idea being it's God didn't mind having money or a nice house or a car or whatever as long as it didn't captivate your heart. It was okay to have it if it didn't have you. But I was never comfortable with that concept, that idea, because the reality is our heart is deceitfully wicked. Who can know it? In other words, how do we really know if it has us or not? It's very misleading. Or, as many of my very good friends will say, what Jesus actually said was, you can't love God and mammon. And mammon is actually a spirit. But really, it still highlights the same issue, that the things that we desire most so easily become idols. We begin to covet. They become the things that we build our life around. And God, as always, desires to be the center of our life, of our focus. So does that mean that success, financial independence, freedom, that these concepts are just completely wrong? Well, my plan is to settle the issue once and for all. And it all revolves around generosity. So Luke chapter 11. The Pharisees are critical of the disciples because they're saying the disciples didn't wash their hands. And Jesus' response is what really gets our attention. See, what Jesus said was, you wash the outside of the container, but you leave the inside filthy, dirty, unclean. And he goes on and says, give what's in the container to the poor, and it purifies everything else. Or as the New Living Translation says it, purity is demonstrated in generosity. See, it isn't the outside of anything that defiles it, but it is truly our heart, our desires. And genuine generosity purifies our motives. Now, you notice I put a real emphasis there on genuine. There is a type of generosity that really is all about manipulation. It's giving to get. But genuine generosity purifies our motives. And let's look at the benefits of generosity. So not only does it purify our motives, that we can now have confidence when we're genuinely generous, that our motives are pure, that it's okay. And there are further benefits. That what happens? Generosity is meant to overflow and impact others, which we'll come back to, but generosity breaks the curse and releases God's blessing that Malachi 3 says. Now, here's the way to look at it. Think of blessing as this tapping into God's power that brings acceleration and momentum. In other words, you go from strength to strength. So generosity releases God's blessing. It's not some magic. It's actually just this spiritual impact that happens. And cursing is the opposite. Think of cursing as that it detaches you from that power. And cursing makes everything so much harder. That when sin entered into the Garden of Eden, God cursed the land, which meant everything they did, everything they produced was so much harder, so much more work. But Malachi 3, God says that as we are genuinely generous, that He will rebuke the devourer. He'll break the curse, and He'll pour out such a blessing that we can't receive it all. Which goes full circle to the idea that then we're more generous, that we would have an abundance for every good work, that it would overflow and impact other lives, and the cycle would just continue. So generosity releases God's blessing. It breaks the curse. It also demonstrates that we belong to God. Deuteronomy talks about that these kind of things would be the evidence to the world around us that we belong to the living God. That a benefit is we begin to demonstrate God's very character, who is always giving and always generous. And as I've said a couple of times, it would overflow and it would bring power, life, transformation to the world around us. So generosity is what purifies our motives, and generosity should settle the matter once and for all. But there's a test. See, think of it this way. Money and success in one form for the believer are a form of test. How will we respond? See, the world just thinks it just continues forever. But for the Christian, for the believer, we need to recognize that it's a continued demonstration of where our confidence, our trust truly lies. And on top of that, just leaving you with one last thought. When we think we're generous, when we really believe we are, I got challenged once by a young guy that was working for me. This is years ago, and I was doing a seminar on a Saturday, and he made a comment. He said, if you're giving and it doesn't pinch a little bit, is it real generosity? In other words, in your giving, if it becomes so comfortable that it doesn't require second thought, obviously there's not a great deal of faith involved, but more importantly, is it genuine generosity? That we should be, as leaders, we should be continually challenged and stretched and moving further in generosity. And that generosity would not just be about financial issues, but it would be every aspect of our life, giving every aspect of our life generously to the people and the world around us. But ultimately, it purifies our motives. It means that we can have a desire for success, for independence, for freedom, etc. But also recognizing that we are placing our confidence and our dependence on God first, that it's not what we can get, but what comes from Him, and using it to impact the world around us. And we do it all through the power of application.